Cool. Hi, everyone. I'm Jess. I don't know if I've been in Learning Lab for quite a while, so I haven't met a lot of you, but nice to meet anyone I haven't met. I'm at the Lakeview office 3 days a week, and then I'm in Wilmette on Tuesdays. I've been working here for almost 4 years now, and I'm not an expert on phobias by any means, but I have worked with a lot of phobias over the years, and I really enjoy working with them. So hopefully my experience can help today. I think there's a lot of nuances with like emetophobia and driving phobia and fear of flying. So I'm excited that you guys get to dive more into those topics in the future weeks, but this will be kind of just an overview. Phobia is just a general intro. As you all probably know, it's an extreme fear or anxiety of a specific object or situation. And the fear is always out of proportion to the actual danger. It's not that they're scared when they're swimming in a pool of sharks. It's that they're scared of sharks when they're not there. It's usually irrational and yeah, out of context, out of proportion to the actual fear, the actual need to be scared. They usually avoid and have like unreasonable reactions. Like running away from a dog that's like petting other people, or like really excited to see other people, not being able to do things, not being able to go to higher floors if you're afraid of heights. So there's a significant amount of avoidance. And then the main thing with diagnosing a phobia is that it causes clinically significant distress. So I always say with my clients, like, I don't like spiders, but they don't stop me from doing anything. And so it turns into a diagnosable phobia and a kind of need to work on it when it's getting in the way of functioning or it's getting in the way of them like being happy and living their life, causing clinically significant distress. There's different subtypes when you diagnose. And I bolded the ones we're going to kind of go over today. The other ones kind of involve upcoming topics in Learning Lab, so we won't get to any of those. I think those will be good to get into more depth, but mostly we're going to be talking about animals and then natural environment like heights, storms, specific things like that. So very specific objects or situations. All right, and we don't have any formal questionnaires or resources at LOA to use for diagnosing phobias. I haven't used either of these, but I found them online and they seem pretty helpful. The top one is just a snapshot of a specific phobia questionnaire, and this kind of just goes into how much do I fear this item and how much does it interfere with my life. I feel like this could be really helpful if someone has multiple phobias and you're trying to figure out which one's impacting them the most and which one you want to start addressing first. And then this other one is a severity measure for adults with phobias, and it can just assess how severe the phobia is. So this could be helpful resources to look into. But no like formal questionnaires that we have through the portal or anything. And usually pretty straightforward. People usually come in knowing that they have a phobia of this item or that they want to work on this. And the main thing with phobias is how to treat it. So I like to say it's kind of similar to treating OCD. There's a lot of cognitive restructuring, I would say, in the first session. With kids especially, they can completely like not understand the likelihood of their feared outcome. For example, like having a fear of bees and not understanding that like maybe they're not going to come and sting you out of nowhere, or like not knowing that bumblebees don't sting, for example. So they might have an unrealistic expectation of what something's going to be, or with like fear of shots, like not understanding how painful it might be. With adults too, I think it can be helpful still to explore their feared outcome and talk through the likelihood. And you want to get them to understand that it is irrational. It's not out of proportion to the actual danger. We don't want them to be put in a dangerous situation with this phobia. It's more that, can we get to a point where you're reacting to it the same way other people would? And so some cognitive restructuring towards the beginning. A lot of motivational interviewing is helpful, especially with kids. They might not want to be working on this phobia. They might be coming in for something else, but then you notice they have this phobia and it's really impacting them. So talking about like what it gets in the way of, how is your life impacted? What would you be able to do if you didn't have this fear? what would you be doing differently? How would your life be different? Getting them to understand like why they actually want to work on these things and overcome it. The main crux of treatment is ERP. And I think really getting into the psychoed on the purpose of exposures is crucial. Talking about we're doing this because we need to practice facing our fear, going towards the fear. We need to show ourselves, our brain, and teach our brain that we're actually safe in this situation, even though it feels dangerous right now. And so we're going to practice like systematic desensitization with it. With kids, I like to emphasize like practicing being brave, and we're going to practice facing our fears. And then that usually needs to involve rewards of some kind. If you're doing an exposure in session, I just like to use a prize at the end of the session or a sticker. If you're having them do something at home, it's can we do that? And then can we plan to like have you go out for ice cream afterwards? Kind of showing yourself that like I'm proud of myself for doing this hard thing and practicing being brave. Similar to OCD exposures, if we don't want to do it, how can we incentivize them to do it? But really getting back into that buy-in of like, this is why I want to do it, this is bothering me, and this is how I can move forward by facing the fear. ERP with phobias, I really enjoy working with it because you have to be really creative. Because each phobia is different and each phobia has very specific like aspects that impact someone. Like someone might be scared of just a specific type of dog, right? Not every single dog. Someone might be scared of like a very specific object that you've never heard of someone having a phobia of. And so you have to get creative with exposures. They're not all going to be like listed in a hierarchy online or like have something on the top of your head ready to go, but you really collaborate with clients and really talk through what are some ways that we can practice going towards this fear and immersing ourselves in it. And yeah, get creative with making an exposure hierarchy, reviewing why we're doing it. And I'm going to go through some examples in a sec too of like cases I've worked with and different like ways I've had to be creative with it. A big part that can be challenging for people is that sometimes someone has multiple phobias or they have a phobia in addition to like generalized anxiety or OCD. And so it can be tough to navigate like which one to prioritize. And part of that's just collaborating with the client on the treatment plan of where do you want to start. With multiple phobias, figuring out like what's impacting you the most and how would it be helpful to focus on this phobia first and then this one later. I usually recommend doing one at a time if you're going to address like 3 different phobias that they have. Exposing them to all 3 like within a session or back to back probably isn't as helpful as like overcoming one phobia and feeling like they can manage that and then trying to move on to the next one, because that also builds their confidence that they can work through it rather than like overwhelming them with multiple exposures. And if it's a phobia that isn't impacting them quite as much as like their OCD is, for example, then it's okay to maybe prioritize the OCD and work on the phobia later. It also depends on motivation. If they're really unmotivated and resistant to working on their OCD, for example, okay, well, there's this phobia that you have that's really impacting your life as well. Can we focus on that and kind of build your confidence and improve quality of life with that? And then we can switch gears and redirect to the OCD. All right, so I was just going to mention 2 cases that I've worked with. One was a 30-year-old man that I worked with. He had a fear of storms, and he would drive like to middle of Illinois whenever there was a big storm coming and stay at a hotel because he was so anxious about being in town for it. He would like compulsively check the weather. He'd come in and be like, tonight there's going to be a 13% chance of rain. In 3 days, there's an 80% chance it's going to storm, so I'm not going to be here. And it was really impacting his life because he would have plans with his partner or something, and then he'd have to leave town for a night. He was constantly checking things. He was worrying about the weather all day. And a lot of it was like just a fear of safety, even though he logically knew and could like remind himself that he was physically safe. His body would not understand that, and he couldn't get himself to be calm in storm situations. And he had a lot of safety behaviors as well. So if he had to be in town with when there was a storm, he would usually he would drink. He would have to be at his partner's because his girlfriend's place felt safer for some reason with the layout of the building, things like that. So exposures with that one was tricky because there isn't a storm every day where you can practice working through it. He had previously done VR for it, virtual reality, and then he was doing that on his own in addition to our sessions, which was really helpful. We really worked on limiting checking behaviors. So can we only check the weather forecast a certain number of times a day or for this amount of time, and accept the uncertainty otherwise that it might have changed, and that's okay, and we'll check it later. And then we were trying to get him to stay in town when there was a storm coming, and slowly reduce safety behavior. So maybe the first time it's okay, let's go to your girlfriend's, let's do your safety behaviors, but at least not have to leave. And that's at least improving functioning outside of the storm period. And then we were working on, okay, can we not be drinking alcohol when there's a storm? Can we use noise canceling headphones? Can we find other ways to approach it so that he's using some safety behaviors, but not all of them? So slowly getting rid of those, and showing himself he can handle it. It didn't really work to use videos of storms or rain sounds or things like that, but it is something we tried. And I think with exposures to normalizing that some things will work and trigger that anxiety and some things won't, because sometimes your brain just knows this isn't realistic. So being flexible too with trying things out, and maybe it's not as effective and then you switch gears. This client in particular ended up moving out of state, so I don't know where he ended up, but he had made some progress for sure with being able to stay in town. And that's that one. And then I worked with a client a couple years ago at LOA with a fear of balloons and fireworks, and that one was really interesting. She couldn't attend birthday parties because of it, and she's 13. And balloons are usually at parties, graduation parties, things like that, family parties. So she was resistant to attending things like that. And then 4th of July, she would hide in her basement with her dog and wear noise canceling headphones and be really anxious. So that was her motivation to work on these things. It was mostly the sound and the uncertainty with the sounds. And she was able to understand that it wasn't physically dangerous, but and exposures with her, we worked on popping balloons in session. So we started with just having a balloon in the room for the whole 53 minutes, just getting her comfortable with that. And then I'd go down the hallway at Lakeview and pop the balloon way down the hall. And then 20 minutes later, we'd do it again and I'd be slightly closer. And so every week we were kind of getting closer and closer. And eventually we were able to pop a balloon within the same room. And yeah, we also watched videos of balloons being popped or a bunch of popped at once. Fireworks were a hard one to in vivo do exposures with, but we did a lot of videos with that as well, imaginal exposures. And then eventually she was able to go to the 4th of July fireworks with her family, and she stayed in the car with noise canceling headphones, but she was at least able to see it and felt like that was enough for her to be able to not hide at home in such high distress. She was at least able to go and be with her family, and her family didn't have to stay home with her. So to her that was enough, and she didn't need to address that further. She felt like she could just continue doing that. And then we ended up terminating. She felt comfortable being able to go to birthday parties. She was still anxious if a balloon did pop, but she wasn't avoiding the situations. So I think also with phobias, it's really important to recognize what is their end goal. Is their end goal, if they have a fear of dogs, to be a dog person. It doesn't have to be. It can just be, can I be around dogs and can I not be avoiding situations where a dog might be there? Can I go to my friend's house where there's a dog there? Can I go to a birthday party where there's balloons, even if I don't care to have balloons at home and pop them regularly? So yeah, just noticing like what does progress look like to them? What would be successful and how would they know they overcame the phobia or worked through it? But yeah, I went through that kind of fast, but I feel like phobias are pretty straightforward. It's pretty similar to OCD treatment with ERP. And then, yeah, different types of phobias like emetophobia and fear of driving and stuff like that can be a little trickier and can also be more prominent. I've worked with like probably like 20 emetophobia cases, and it's been like more prevalent lately. So I think having more to talk about with those is important. But yeah, specific objects, specific situations are very straightforward, but also can be fun and creative. And yeah, you like with balloons and stuff, you really have to get creative with what types of exposures you're going to do and kind of get their buy-in. Um, and then I have two cases that I'm going to have us talk about just as a big group in terms of what we would do, what follow-up questions we would ask, exploring exposure ideas, and then we can get into if anyone else has current cases at LOA with phobias and they want some insight as to how they'd manage certain exposures or get more ideas and collaborate. We can do that too. Yes, I Jessica's question. Yeah, I did tell the people, I think Alexis was across the hall at the time, and I was like, hey, just heads up, in an hour, I'm going to be popping a balloon down the hall. And I usually would only pop like one or two in the session. It wasn't like popping 20 at once because yeah, that'd become a lot. Um, but yes, I did try to let people know we're close by. But yeah, so we can get into practice situations. The first one I thought we could talk about is fear of heights. So thinking about if we had an adult with a fear of heights who couldn't go past the third floor and it impacts his ability to go to doctor's appointments downtown, and he can't go to his friend's apartment because it's on the, let's say, the fifth floor. If anyone wants to start with any follow-up questions they'd ask, exposure ideas, how you'd explore motivation. I can type these questions into the chat too, and then we can stop presenting. But or similarly, does anyone have any fear of heights clients right now or recently that they've had to do similar things with?
Hey, I have a client who her main thing is fear of driving, but it ended up also being with fear of heights and like especially going on like high overpasses and stuff. So I'm thinking of her, but with him, I guess I would ask like what happens when you're noticing or when you're afraid, like what happens in your body, how does it feel? Is it different if you're close to a window? Is it different if you're on a balcony? I don't know, just like kind of exploring different ways. And I'd probably for the motivation piece, like what would your like life look like if you were able to do this and you weren't scared? Like could you go to more friends' houses, parties, whatever? I guess see like why he wants to overcome it.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Okay, so getting details on yeah different situations that cause it, and yeah, and exploring the motivation more. Alexis?
Well, first, yes, I do remember your balloon client and the excitement I felt when she terminated. So I no longer have to be scared myself from the balloons popping. But great job. And also awesome job in the presentation. I've learned so much. But my question and that ask, and also I want to like pick your brain on is doing the downward arrow exercise of like kind of like figuring out what is like, okay, you say you're afraid of heights, but like, and then what? Like, is it fear of getting pushed? Is it fear of like falling? Is it fear of death? Is it just the fear of like the stomach tingling feeling sometimes we get? And then maybe doing like exposures from there.
Yeah, for sure. That's a good point. The downward arrow technique for really any client with phobias. Yeah, like what is the actual feared outcome? What's the worst that could happen? Um, yeah. Yeah, Susan?
I have a client with driving anxiety right now, and she's been slowly able to use GPS when she's driving. One of her core fears is not knowing where she's going to be going. So she's practicing driving without a plan, driving without planning ahead of time. Another thing that she's doing is trying to approach an on ramp for a highway and also, right? So one of her things is to avoid thinking about driving. She's a great public speaker. So we actually compared how she prepares for public speaking compared to how she prepares to drive. So for public speaking, she prepares in advance. For driving, she avoids thinking about it until the moment she has to get on the on ramp. So that causes her to panic. So we decided to do a worst case scenario, which is not like I'm going to die when I'm driving, not I'm going to crash. It's not like that. It's more I'm afraid of the traffic speeding up. I'm afraid of the walls, and I might see like construction, that sort of thing. So just the uncertainty of the whole experience. So she's writing a worst case scenario to listen to during the week. She'll write it out and record it on her phone, listen to it several times during the week, and then practice driving like around her block, listening to it, and then eventually drive a little further, and then maybe have somebody like her husband sit in the car with her while she drives on the highway or listens to it while she can drive with her husband in the car. So that's a kind of reassurance seeking behavior, right? So eventually she knows that she'll have to not do that, but we're trying to like break down her fear into like small baby steps. So it'll be interesting to see how she does across this week.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. I think that's a good point about like this like safety person kind of having someone with you can feel a lot safer. And eventually we do want to get rid of that behavior, but it can be a great starting point of like, if I do not feel able to do this exposure on my own, let's do it with a person. And then the next time we can try to do it without them. Same with like fear of heights. Can we go to the fourth floor of a building with someone that we trust and that feels more comfortable? Can we go visit someone's apartment who we're like friends with and who will be supportive if I get anxious? Yeah, figuring out what you can do to have like more baby steps towards the bigger exposure, for sure. And like different situations, like with driving anxiety, yeah, traffic can be a factor. So maybe it's different times of the day that you're going. With heights, it could be like how crowded the places that you're going to, or knowing where you're going ahead of time, being in a room without windows at first, or things like that. So,
Yes, yeah, I can read the questions for you, or if you're kind of just going through.
yeah, Miranda said, like, what else this client might be avoiding doing, or any safety behaviors they do when they need to go to the doctor, which is great. Miranda, anything to add to that?
trying to find like that motivation piece,
Mhm.
because if we can kind of get at, I think like what Alexis was saying, like what's really like the core fear there, and then using that to help the client find that motivation of like, okay, so is this like a really close friend, or is this somebody that you'll just completely avoid seeing? And like, how much do you care about this relationship in terms of like finding what is really going to motivate them to like go through this process of doing exposures? And then like, do you take the stairs? Like, do you just not go to the doctor? Because that's also important. Like, we kind of want to know when's the last time, or like the dentist, or do you not go on vacation because you might have to stay in a hotel that's like on the 15th floor? And maybe like they really want to go on vacation with their family, or I don't know, like things like that. I would be super curious about like other places they're avoiding or things they're not doing.
Yeah, definitely. And using that as motivators too. Like, yeah, I do want to go on vacation. I do need to go to the dentist, etc. Awesome. Well, and then just Campbell put like figuring out why the third floor, just like this person decided that it was safe, right? Which is great too. Sometimes like phobias and OCD can have very specific rules that don't make sense, and they understand that they don't make sense. They're just like, this place is safe. I don't know why, or this one's okay. And sometimes it is just like realistically, like, oh, I've been to the third floor a bunch. I've had to because that's where my normal doctor is, or that's like my mom lives on the third floor of a building, and that's where I'm always going. And so that one's been fine. Yeah, exploring. Yeah, what feels safe about that. And then Anna, you said considering what we have tried to get through it already. Anything else to add there?
Yeah, totally. So, not for heights, but what I've seen, at least for fear of driving, is like they'll put on a specific song, like just to get through it. And so, like, what have we tried already? What haven't we tried in terms of engaging in exposures? Or even like if they're trying to, like the client I'm thinking of, she picks up her daughter. And so she can't exactly be panicking the minute that her kid gets in the car because her daughter's like 6. So how do we regulate our nervous system through that exposure that we just tried? So kind of thinking about that back half of, okay, wait, we did the exposures. How do we get the exposures? And then how can we be okay after? So a lot of that, as well as with like at least the driving anxiety or even the fear of heights, like, okay, have we just kind of like pretended that we didn't know like what floor we were going on? Did we like we're going up and we like close our eyes when we hit certain buttons on the elevator? Or like, is it easier when it's on the elevator versus when we go up via stairs? Like, what have we tried for avoidance versus like what have we tried just to like trick our anxiety, all those fun different things, like just more details and stuff.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I think, yeah, there's a combination of finding out like what coping strategies are effective when we're in these high stress situations, and then also how can we like not do some of these things if they're like a safety behavior during an exposure. Yeah, so it's balancing that too. But yeah, that sounds really helpful figuring out, yeah, what's been working so far. Yeah, Lisa?
I'm wondering as clinicians, if anybody here has any of these fears. I mean, TMI, but I have a fear of heights. So even just talking about this, like my hands are sweating, my heart is racing. So I can like totally happy to be an example. But I'm curious for you guys, when you do, does anybody have phobias, and what it's like for you when you have to maybe do an exposure that's clearly an exposure for yourselves as well? Maybe it's not relatable. Yeah, Jessica.
Okay, so
Are
I
you?
didn't think I had a phobia of vomit, and I don't think I do, but like doing any sort of, and this isn't the same if anything we're talking about, but like doing the exposures with my clients, like picking up the fake vomit, especially that, I like physically, like I feel myself like cringe and like my heart's beating really fast. So I also have to practice those skills. And sometimes it's like kind of encouragement, depending on the client, of like, okay, we're kind of in this together. Like we can do it together. So I totally get it.
Yeah, a bunch of other people are putting in the chat too that they have them. Yeah, I can speak to it too. Yeah, with emetophobia, I really normalize like like I get uncomfortable or grossed out by doing these exposures too. It's not fun to look at a photo of vomit. It's not fun to watch a video of this. And so I'm always like, okay, well, my suds are at like a 2 or a 3 regardless. And so maybe it's not realistic for it to get to a 0. And then I had a kid with a phobia of spiders and like tarantulas, and I hate spiders. And so I was normalizing it. I'm like, I have a phobia of it too. Like I do not like these things either. And so I was like visibly like grossed out, but I was like kind of just trying to normalize it and being like, we're doing this exposure together. Like it's hard, but let's be able to look at this picture in this video. And like maybe it's kind of just normalizing that it's tough and these things can be scary for a lot of people. So especially with kids, I don't think it hurts to like validate that too, that it is like a gross thing, or like not a lot of people love bees or being on tall buildings and things like that.
Thank you for all the wonderful work that you all do. And again, Jess, I know that she's a clinician success manager here as well, as is Alexis. So if you guys need anything additional, we're all here for you. Have a great day.